Hey you, welcome back. It's been fun. I feel like I'm missing my Mr. Rogers cardigan, which I used to wear all the time, but it's 90 degrees in the shop and we don't have air conditioning yet, which by the way, if this is your first time to a Martini Works video, welcome. We sell car parts. We help you mod your car at martiniworks.com, and we're growing like a weed, and it's all thanks to you. Dakota, Gels, and I, we've been fighting tooth and nail to get a cool series started up. Y'all love learning about information on random cars, I guess, and I love learning and researching about random car information. I figured we'd talk about probably the second most controversial car out there right now, the E90 generation, so the E90, E91, E92 BMW. This car's gotten insanely popular over the last few years for folks like you and folks like me because number one, it's affordable. Number two, it's fun to drive when it works, like most things. And number three, it's having people ask me a lot of questions about it because sometimes the deal almost seems too good to be true. So welcome to 20 minutes of useless car information on the E90 BMW. Again, if you're looking for car parts, wheels, tires, suspension, wheel and tire packages, intakes, exhausts, you can head on over to martiniworks.com. If you already have a BMW modified, add it to our build threads. We're really trying to make something special there, bring back the days of the car forums where you can learn from people who already built their car on how to build your very own car. And of course, if you have questions along any of this, you can just drop it below. We are watching it like a hawk because I just love reading the comments. Number one, let's talk a little bit about the E90 as is just the car. It's probably the most understated generation of the 3 Series in terms of what people typically look out to go buy. I would say it goes in order of this. E46 is almost always the first generation, 3 Series people gravitate towards. Then they jump to the E36 because they're told it's like a more raw and visceral driving experience. And then they jump up to that E90 series where they're not really sure if they should be here, but they're here because either their budget told them to, or they live in like St. Cloud, Minnesota, and every single E36 is just absolutely rusted out of its mind. Now, this series pretty much dates back, I can't even believe it, into the early 2000s. This was one of the very first times that they started to really push in a turbocharged engine into the 3 Series platform, which is why we're even talking about this. We probably wouldn't be talking about this chassis as much if it had the same recipe from BMW of naturally aspirated inline 6, maybe mid 200s, low 200 horsepower, rear wheel drive manual, limited slip differential, but not turbo. The cars have gotten too big to survive off of that, especially BMWs, which is one of the main reasons people even complained about this generation. But I hate to break it to you, BMW enthusiasts complain about every new generation that comes out ever. I've never ever heard of a BMW enthusiast loving the newest version of their car because apparently, according to them, they're constantly getting less good for like a year, and then everybody loves them again. BMW does this thing, they put some magic sauce, they put something in the milk around here, and after a couple months, everybody learns to love it. When the E46 came out, nobody liked it. They wanted the E36 because it was more raw, it was more visceral, it was a more connected steering wheel experience, and then everybody realized that the E46 was objectively just better. E36 to the E30 was the same way. I don't understand, but I'm giving credit where credit is due. The BMW car community is some of the fastest learning and willing to change their own mind attitude because when they adopt it, when they finally give it a chance, they'll always tell you that they fell in love with it, that they love it, that it worked out well. And the E90 is a perfect example of that as well. Turbocharged inline 6s, in my opinion, are the reason that we can all even enjoy BMWs without them being a $90,000 car off the dealership lot. Like, the fact that we can have some fun with this car as is insane. But why do E90s seem to be like the new pick-me car for people with hairbrush hair and takeovers? I think this kind of falls into the same exact conversation we've had about the Infiniti G35 and the Subaru WRX. Now, the Infiniti G35 was a higher horsepower rear-wheel drive manual coupe that was made in a million different variants and a million different trims. If you want to learn about that, you can actually check out the last video we did, which talked about that car. But because of that, they were affordable, which means people could jump into them really cheaply, even now with like 150,000 miles. E90s are also getting into that, but not so much because they were made a ton. They were one of the most successful car productions ever during the time, especially that 335. But the reason that this kind of hits this group is because BMW chose to put that turbocharged engine into a lot of different trim options and a lot of different package options that just kind of littered everywhere. And finally, the secondhand and third-hand buyers saw that you could get a direct injection turbocharged 6-cylinder, and they're like, I want that, okay? The selling success of the E90 and the fact that it just came with a really solid motor is why we're even here. So the old E90, E92s though, in terms of like a design perspective, you can tell me if I'm wrong, but a lot of people aren't huge fans of anything pre-2009. The pre-2009, people will say kind of looks a little bit buck-tooth-ish, whereas most people from 2009 and onward would say that they really like it. With that being said, the turbocharged inline 6 was, in my opinion, the first major step of BMW making a car for normal folk to modify. It may have been unintentional in its entirety, but it packs a serious punch for normal, everyday enthusiasts that are looking for a one-car shop. They don't have 2 cars, they don't have 3 cars. They were looking for a one-car does-it-all kind of answer, and the E90 does that. The E92 kind of does that, but the E90 really does that. The spacing, the comfort, the packaging, the premium, the ability that you can get these things in all-wheel drive or wheel-wheel drive, auto or manual. All of this was just the perfect package. And I would still say, in terms of like top 5 cars you could buy used to modify right now, the E90 335 is definitely in there, as long as you know what you're doing, as long as you know what you're getting around. Now, here's the thing to keep in mind with the different trim options, so bear with me. There's a ton of different trim options you can get. I'm not gonna really focus on like the performance packages or the winter packages or all of that. We'll just have Josh just put all the trim options here. Nice. Okay, so the 328 N52 with 230 horsepower. Then you got a 328 Xi. The X just means all-wheel drive. So you got 230 horsepower with all-wheel drive. Then you got the 335i, which was a 3-liter turbocharged inline 6 with 300 horsepower, known as the N54, or the N55. N55 you're gonna hear a couple times. N54 folk, don't worry, I still love you. The 335 Xi is the same thing with all-wheel drive. The 335D is an ultra-rare, ultra-wild, coolest E90 ever made in the world. And if you have a 335D, you need to hold on to it. You need to never sell it, because that's gonna be a $100,000 car in like 10 years. I know it. Turbocharged, but diesel, 265 horsepower and 1 billion foot-pounds of torque. The M3, which we'll talk in a little bit here, came with a 4-liter V8. That one was a weird one, and that's what actually put a lot of people off initially to the E90 chassis, especially when the M3 came out, because BMW enthusiasts are always cautiously optimistic about what BMW is up to. Now, you might be saying, Alex, I'm still on the fence between the E46 and E90. Turbocharger, not really that big of a deal for me. All-wheel drive, not really that big of a deal for me. What are like the key differences between these two? Because an E90 might cost you 15 grand and an E46 might cost you 5. Well, here's some things objectively right off the cuff that you're gonna notice are a little bit different. First thing, the E90 design language on the exterior is smoother. It's a little bit like butter. Sure, it's got rakier lines in certain places, and some people will say overall it is more aggressive. I think the earlier versions aren't, but the later versions are. But really that design approach was catered to BMW trying to create a car that could meet the needs of a more wider range of people. Not enthusiasts, but normal human beings that have a normal job that treat a car like a car and not like a trophy. So you see it kind of get, some people will say there's some subtle elements of like femininity in the design. Personally, for me, I like it. I think it looks really good, especially considering that it is a little bit bigger, but that E46 is gonna be a little bit sharper. It's gonna have a little bit more of like that old school style that a lot of people love. And I think it does carry a little bit more of like an old style design element. Not that it is by itself old, but the design elements of it were more classic BMW. Why do the E46 and E90s feel different? Most of it has to do was steering. So the E90 steering is a bit heavier, and that's because of its consistency. Because of the weight, because of the all-wheel drive system, because of just a lot of the changes they were making, they wanted to make sure that the car felt good at slow speeds, slow turns, slow corners, and it felt comfortable at the high speeds as well. The E46 had a little bit more of like a linear experience, where at slow speeds, it kind of was a little bit harder to move around, or at least not harder, but it didn't help you as much. Whereas with the E90 is helping you turn more. And so as you start to add little assists to your steering input, those little assists that you see or feel are the things that make people say that it doesn't feel as connected to the road. Every single time they add something in, such as a pressure vacuum, some sort of hydraulic assist, some sort of steering lock assist, those are all things that can kind of get in the way, like John Cena, of just a raw driving experience. Doesn't always mean it's bad, just means it is what it is. So why are they so cheap? Why are you looking at E90s asking yourself, why the hell are these $8,000 or $10,000, which I know is still not cheap. You're still taking out a loan for this stuff. It still costs money. Don't hear me say that I think $8,000 is cheap. But in terms of what you could also get, it's a really great value. It follows the same recipe as Subaru and their WRX. They're made plenty, owned by more than just car enthusiasts, and when they're broken, they aren't always repaired the right way, which makes the cost of them come down, because a lot of times people are just trying to get out of an N54 that's got bad injectors, or it has a bad fuel pump, or has a bad water pump, or has high mileage, or had a cord randomly eaten in it. So, important to remember here, the N54 specifically, we're talking about those 335i's, those 335xi's as well. These things came twin turbocharged, direct injection, and with just a flash tune, they're like 380 horsepower. 400 foot-pounds of torque have been reported on just a flash-tuned N54. So a lot of people that don't treat the car as a car, they just want to drive something fast until it blows up. That's the very first thing that they do, and then the rest just goes to shit. So here's the thing. Every accessory item on the N54 is the weak point. The stuff that's connected to the engine is typically where you see issues with the N54. Examples of this, we talk about the water pump, carbon buildup, oil pressure filter, fuel injection, and a lot of times just all the plastic bits that are around the engine, you're gonna see fail and need to get replaced. Here's the thing. It came with forged internals, which is great for people like you and people like me because we love that shit. But again, it wasn't perfect. The water pump failure is because there's a manufacturing seam on the actual water pump and it's not made of metal. Because of that, that's the weak point with heat. Turbocharged cars run hot. They get cool, they run hot. They get cool, they run hot. Contrast, they expand, they contract. They expand, they contract. And over time, anything that's plastic or anything that's sealed multi-piece with plastic is gonna break. Number two, carbon buildup. So these engines are direct injection, meaning that that's getting directly injected into the cylinder for the combustion, the fuel is. A lot of times what people don't understand about this, and this is actually a fun little fact, is fuel is actually an excellent cleaner for things in your engine. It's great for cleaning your valves because it burns off. And when it burns off, it burns a lot of those deposits off with it. That's why a lot of fancy companies out there talk about how their fuel at their gas station will clean up carbon debris because it's igniting that inside or on top of the valve. Direct injection, you don't have that because you're feeding fuel directly into the cylinder, but you still need the valves to get air in and to get everything else out. What happens over time is because of any mismanagement with timing or turning off and turning on as the car's trying to warm up, as that fuel gets into that cylinder and those valves open up, a lot of times that can come back up and gunk up the top of the valves, causing carbon buildup. This gets extended, this gets exaggerated when people throw a flash tune on it and don't actually do any of the other work to make sure that the car's engine or motor is actually clean and healthy. This is where you'd walnut blast, in case you're wondering what that term is. It's literally just walnut shells blasting at your valves until it's clean. I wish there was a fancier way to explain it. There's not. That's it. High pressure fuel pump, again, it's a two-piece assembly. It's got an O-ring in it that seals the two halves together. It degrades over time, and again, it fails. Fuel injectors will actually have carbon buildup as well. So if you're looking to understand if the E90 you're about to buy is the right one, make sure you're looking at the maintenance and make sure you're taking a look at those things. A lot of times, water pump, high pressure fuel pump, injectors / walnut blasting are some really big things to look out for. And if you've bought one and you've got tips on what to look out for, just let us know below for anybody that's watching this. So why does this happen all the time? I remember when the E90s actually came out and everybody called them unreliable pieces of junk. And the reason that I think they said that was because this was BMW's first major investment of a turbocharged engine in mass volume to a mass market in the E90 generation. You're going to see most, if not all, the issues related to this car are because of heat, injection issues, or heat soak issues. We talk about expanding and contracting. Those are all things that are tolerable. Those are all things that you can take care of. Those are all things that, as long as you're okay with getting your hands dirty and you're okay with learning a little bit, I don't think it's the terrible end of the world thing. The biggest issue with BMWs is what happens after people don't take care of this. It is the byproduct of not getting your valves clean. It is the byproduct of letting your high pressure fuel pump continue to have issues, not taking care of it, and then you start starving the engine. These are one of those things where, as long as you stay on top of it, if you are somebody that actually gets your teeth cleaned at the dentist every 6 months, you're going to love owning an E90 BMW. But if you avoid calling the dentist to set up your own appointment, you're not gonna enjoy owning a 335 with an N54 because you're just not gonna take care of it the way that you should. Now that we got that out of the way, I feel like I personally attacked you, and I'm sorry. I'm just looking out for the best of you. Don't call me dad, call me daddy. I'm sorry. Let's get into the final thing. Modifying these things, absolute ton of fun. There's a bunch of parts that you can actually throw on your E90 over on martiniworks.com. Highly recommend that you get it from us so that we can help you out. We also have a chat. It's just a chat. When you click it, you're talking to Carissa or Hamby or myself. You know, we can help you figure out what works. But BMW, the E90 platform, looks fantastic with the right setup. We've seen people run BBS wheels if they've got a ton of money, and we've seen people run maybe some more affordable options as well. The last thing is this big one that's been sitting out there. Why did BMW make the E90 M3 with a V8? For everybody that knows, this has always been iconically a non-turbocharged car leading up to the E90. And it's kind of an odd story. So if you guys don't know, the V8 M3 is an 8,400 RPM V8, came out of the M5. And the reason that it didn't come naturally aspirated with some sort of crazy inline six or something like that, or even turbocharged inline six, was because the 6-cylinder of the E46 wasn't capable enough anymore to do what the M3 needed. Helmut Himmler, careful, Helmut Himmler, the product manager for the E92 M3, had already derived a successful connection of the V10 from the M5 into the M3, and BMW, the M Sport, made a decision that it was better to go with the M5 engine because BMW M was very against turbocharging at the time. If you followed BMW for a number of years, very, very vocal internal company on what they like and what they don't like. And M has always been very against turbocharging, at least in the 2000s, for their M Motorsport. It's always been a thing. And obviously the success of the later generations proved that to be kind of false. But at the time, they were very much against it. The M3 had a 4.6 second 0 to 60 with a 6-speed manual. With only 40,000 coupes made too, they have gotten quite expensive. The lowest price I ever saw an E92 M3 was $20,000, and that was about 7 years ago, I remember. And everybody was giving them crap because they were the V8. I think you're not gonna see them for under 35, 40,000 in the next couple of years because they are rare and they are a very cool car. Carbon roof. My favorite one ever made was the M3 GTS, not that you need to know that, in that orange finish. The E92 M3 came back to DTM, by the way, and after a 20-year break, had a season debut in 2012, and it won the Drivers' Championship, which was just absolutely wild. The M3 GT2 won the 2010 24-Hour of Le Mans. It won the GT2 category of the ILMC 2010 1,000-kilometer of Zhuhai in China. The racing pedigree of the E90 was iconic, and it still is. The thing you need to hear about this car, if you're thinking about picking one up, is that on the M side of things, it's a gorgeous car. You're picking up a perfect example. If you're looking at the 330i or the 335i or the 335xi, also a great car, but it requires your eye to stay on the maintenance. And if it doesn't, it can go downhill really fast, like a chubby kid that trips, and now you're trying to grab him, but you only weigh 100 pounds and there's no way you're gonna save him. It's just not a good thing. That is BMW reliability in a nutshell. They can be awesome cars, they can be super fun cars, but you need to keep an eye on them, and you need to make sure you do that preventative maintenance. But if you have any questions on the E90 platform, E91 or E92, let us know below. And if there's a car you want us to talk about, just drop it there as well. Hopefully you subscribed, you enjoyed 20 minutes of absolutely useless information on the E90 BMW. And of course, I apologize for saying E90 so many times when there's so many other ones. There's the E91, E92, and E93, but we're not doing that. I already talk fast enough as it is. You already know that I talk fast. I say at the end of the day a lot, and at the end of the day, we know what we're talking about. We love you. I love you. Goodbye.